The courtroom was colder than I expected, even though it was just another spring morning. I sat quietly at the far end, my fingers clenched into fists under the table, trying to calm the storm building inside me. My parents sat on the opposite bench, whispering something to each other and occasionally glancing at me like I was some stranger they'd bumped into by accident. But this wasn't an accident. This was planned, carefully, cruelly, and with no intention of ever turning back. I kept thinking of last month, the day it started. I had just come home from work, exhausted but relieved. My salary had come in. Finally, after weeks of overtime and constant stress. I sat at the kitchen table with a coffee in hand when Mom walked in, didn't even say hello, just dropped a list on the table. Rent, groceries, repairs for my brother's bike, his new phone, and then she said it. Transfer your salary to your brother's account before the bank closes. Just like that. No discussion, no question. Like I was a walking ATM. I laughed, nervously, unsure if she was joking. She wasn't. Dad walked in 2 minutes later, not to greet me, but to ask if I'd done the transfer. And when I refused, they looked at me like I'd slapped them. Your brother has dreams, Mom said, as if I didn't. He can't waste his time working minimum wage like you. I just blinked at her. I thought she'd take it back. Instead, she walked out like I wasn't even worth the argument. But that wasn't the worst part. The next week, I got a letter. Formal, typed, cold. My parents had hired a lawyer to file a petition to declare me legally unfit to manage my finances. I stared at it for a full hour before I even reacted. Unfit? Because I wanted to keep my own money? Because I said no? And now I was here. Court. Alone. They had a lawyer. Expensive suit, smug smile, papers neatly stacked in front of him. My parents didn't even look guilty. They looked confident, like they were sure they'd win, like I didn't matter. And the judge hadn't even come in yet, but the tension was thick. I could hear people murmuring in the gallery. One woman leaned over to her friend and whispered, "That's the girl whose parents are suing her. Can you imagine?" I kept my face straight, but inside, I wanted to scream. Not because of the whispers, but because part of me was still waiting for my parents to change their minds, to stop this. And then, my brother walked in. He looked smug, wore that expensive jacket I had seen in our online cart 2 weeks ago, the one Mom said they couldn't afford. He looked at me like I was in the wrong seat, like I didn't belong here, like this was his story and I was the villain. I remembered all the nights I stayed up helping him study, the times I gave up my own wants so he could have his. I remembered covering his college fee with my first bonus and lying to my friends about why I couldn't go on vacation. I remembered everything, and I wished I didn't. My lawyer leaned in and whispered, "Just stay calm. Trust me." Calm? I wanted to ask if he was serious, but I nodded. Then they entered, the judge, stern, focused. Everyone stood. My heart was thudding so hard I thought it would give out before the hearing even began. The judge looked at the papers, frowned slightly, then looked directly at me. "You're the respondent?" I nodded. "And the petitioner? Your parents?" I couldn't speak, just nodded again. He went through the case summary quickly, his tone neutral, but his eyes occasionally darted toward my parents with quiet curiosity. And then, right when things felt unbearable, something happened. The court assistant handed over an envelope to the judge. He opened it, read it, and stopped. He looked up at my parents. "This is a copy of financial transactions linked to the petitioner's son's bank account." My mom froze. "These show repeated transfers from the respondent's salary, covering everything from luxury items to debt repayments. Can you explain this?" My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. The judge's voice grew colder. "Is it true you've been using your daughter's income to support your son's lifestyle?" Silence. "And you filed a petition to take control of her finances after she refused to continue funding your son?" I watched their faces drain of color. Finally, my mom spoke. "We were just trying to help our son succeed." The judge's eyebrows raised. "At the cost of your daughter's independence?" There was no answer, just silence. And in that moment, something shifted. The courtroom wasn't cold anymore. It was electric, like everyone was suddenly paying attention, not just to the case, but to the truth. My truth. I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because for the first time, I saw it in their eyes, the realization that they were losing. that their plan wasn't going the way they imagined, that they might actually be exposed. But that was just the beginning. I had proof they didn't know about. I had a voice recording, a conversation between them and their lawyer, discussing how to spin the narrative, how to make me look unstable. They thought I was asleep in the next room. I wasn't, and if they thought the judge was shocked now, they had no idea what was coming next. The judge leaned back slightly, holding the envelope of documents like it was heavier than it looked. His eyes were fixed on my parents, but his mind was clearly racing ahead. The gallery had gone dead silent, like even the air didn't want to move. My brother shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the first crack in his confident armor showing. I looked at him, at the boy I once protected, and wondered when he stopped seeing me as his sister and started seeing me as his personal bank. The judge cleared his throat. Before I make any preliminary decisions, I want to hear from the respondent directly. His eyes met mine. Miss, would you like to say anything? My throat tightened. I hadn't expected to speak today, not yet, but something in his voice told me this was my window, my one chance to show them I wasn't broken. I stood up slowly. My voice was low, but steady. Yes, Your Honor. I have something. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small USB. My hands trembled slightly, not because I was afraid, but because I knew once this came out, nothing could go back to the way it was. My parents don't know I have this, I said, glancing at them briefly. It's a voice recording from 2 weeks ago. They were meeting with their lawyer in our home. I overheard everything, and recorded it. My brother shot up. She's lying. That's illegal. Sit down, the judge said sharply, not even looking at him. I handed the USB to the court assistant. Within seconds, the audio filled the room. It was clear. Every word, every sentence, undeniable. Mom's voice, just say she's unstable. That she's been acting irrational. It's not hard to paint that picture, especially when she doesn't have anyone to vouch for her. Dad's voice, exactly. We just need legal control over her income. She doesn't even spend it properly. Her salary is better used for someone who's trying to make something of his life. Lawyer's voice, we'll make her look like a threat to herself. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to sound true. The room was frozen. When the audio ended, the silence was thicker than before. My mother looked like she might faint. My father was gripping the edge of the bench like it was the only thing holding him up. My brother had his head down, but I could see the anger bubbling under his skin. Not guilt, just rage. Rage that his plan was falling apart. The judge finally spoke. Well, that changes everything. He turned to their lawyer, who looked like he'd swallowed nails. Would you like to proceed with the petition? The judge asked coldly. The lawyer stood up but didn't speak. He just shook his head slowly. The judge looked at my parents. This isn't just an abuse of the legal system. This is emotional manipulation, borderline financial exploitation. You tried to paint your daughter as unstable to gain control over her income. That is not only unethical, it could be criminal depending on how far this went. My mother opened her mouth, but only a weak, "We didn't mean," came out. The judge raised a hand. Enough. He turned back to me. Do you want to press charges? I froze. The question hit harder than I expected. Part of me wanted to say yes, to make them pay for what they tried to do, to make them feel what I felt. But another part of me just wanted to be free. Free from the weight of always hoping they'd change. I shook my head slowly. Number, I just want to be left alone. The judge nodded. Your wishes will be respected. This case is dismissed. The petition is denied, and I'm forwarding this recording to the Bar Association for review. That lawyer will be investigated. He banged the gavel. It was over. Or so I thought. As I gathered my things, my parents finally looked at me. Not with remorse, not even with sadness, but with pure, seething hatred. My father's jaw was clenched, my mother's lips were pressed into a thin, trembling line, and then she whispered, barely audible but sharp enough to cut, "You were never one of us." I paused at the door, turned back, and for the first time in my life, I smiled at her. I know. I walked out of the courtroom and felt the sunlight hit my face. It was warmer now, or maybe I was just lighter, but the story wasn't done, because that night I got a message. Unknown number. Just a single sentence. You think this is over? I stared at it. My hands didn't shake this time. I just locked my phone, sat back on the couch, and waited. because if they thought I didn't have more proof, they were about to find out just how much I'd really kept hidden. The message stayed in my mind the whole night. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Whoever sent it knew I saw it. And that was enough, for now. But I couldn't sleep, not because I was scared, but because I was starting to understand just how far my own family was willing to go. The next morning, I received an email from HR. Please come to the office for an urgent compliance meeting. No explanation, just that. My heart sank. I knew something was wrong before I even stepped out of bed. When I arrived at work, my manager, Lisa, greeted me with a tight smile, not her usual warm one. She gestured toward the glass meeting room without a word. Inside, 2 men from corporate were already seated, files open in front of them. We've received some concerning information, one of them began. A report was submitted claiming you've been mismanaging client data and possibly leaking confidential information. My stomach dropped. What? He continued, flipping a page. There are screenshots, emails, even audio messages. It's all anonymous, but the details are specific. I sat in silence for a moment. Then I spoke carefully. I'd like to see the evidence. They slid a few printed screenshots across the table. I scanned them. At first glance, they looked real. My name, my email, my voice in some of the audio clips. But something didn't add up. The phrasing, the unnatural timing of the messages, the way my voice sounded, edited, slowed, clipped. They're fake, I said calmly. I can prove it. The 2 men looked at each other. I reached into my bag, pulled out a small hard drive. These are my digital backups. Every project, every email, every interaction I've ever had with a client, time-stamped, backed up, verified. If you check these against the evidence you've been given, you'll see what's been manipulated. They hesitated but took the drive. As they plugged it in, I added, also, the person sending those files? It's most likely my brother, or my parents. They're retaliating because I refused to give them control of my finances. They even took me to court for it. Case was dismissed yesterday. The corporate guys sat back, clearly caught off guard. Lisa finally spoke, softly. Why would your own family do this? I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't sugarcoat the answer. Because I stopped being useful. There was a long pause. After 2 hours of verification, the company cleared me completely. The fake evidence didn't hold up. It was traced back to a throwaway email account created just days ago. They said they'd open an investigation into whoever submitted the claim, but I already knew who it was. I left the office that day with a calm face, but inside, I was boiling. This wasn't just family betrayal anymore, it was character assassination. They weren't trying to get money now, they were trying to erase me. I went home and opened the folder on my laptop labeled Insurance. It wasn't about money, it was about protection. I had kept a digital trail of everything, messages, transfers, receipts, even diary voice memos I used to record when I couldn't sleep. I never knew why I held on to them. Now I did. I sat at the table, pulled up the microphone on my laptop, and started recording. For the record, I'm not afraid. I'm just done waiting for them to become people they're not. I paused. And if they're going to try to ruin my life, I want them to know I'm not fighting back. I'm finishing what they started. I closed the laptop and stared into space. That's when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there was no one. Just an envelope on the ground. I picked it up slowly, half expecting it to explode in my hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. Neat. No signature. Withdraw the court complaint. Drop the company inquiry, or next time it won't be just your job on the line. My hands tightened around the paper. They were getting desperate, and desperation makes people sloppy. I went back inside, scanned the note, then ran it through a software I'd used during a digital forensics class years ago. It pulled metadata from the print, a partial document ID, one I recognized, my father's printer model, office-based. They hadn't even tried to hide it. They wanted me to know it was them. They wanted me to be scared, but I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. I picked up my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My uncle, My mom's estranged brother, a quiet man, always in the background, but sharp, smarter than people gave him credit for, and someone my mother always warned me to stay away from. He picked up after 2 rings. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said. "You heard?" "Everything. They came to me first, asked me to support their story in court. I refused." "Why?" He sighed. "Because I've seen what they've done to you, for years, and because they did the same to me, decades ago." I froze. "They tried to ruin you too?" He chuckled bitterly. "Not tried. They almost did, until I left, cut ties, started over." He paused. "You ready to do the same?" I didn't answer right away, but deep down I already knew they weren't going to stop, unless I ended it. I met my uncle at a small diner an hour outside the city. He sat in the corner booth, sipping black coffee like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. When he saw me, he gave a slight nod. Not warm, not cold, just knowing. I slid into the seat across from him, eyes scanning his face. Same sharp cheekbones as my mother, same steel gray eyes. But there was something else, something they never had. Peace. "They're not going to stop, are they?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "Not until they either get what they want or destroy you trying." I didn't blink. "Then I want to destroy them first." A small smile crept into the corners of his lips. Not approval, just recognition, like he'd been in this exact spot before. He pulled out a small notebook from his coat pocket, flipped it open to a page halfway through. "These are names, people your parents have done business with, old favors, shady deals, even a few things they thought were buried. I've been documenting them for years, waiting for the right person to hand them to." "Why didn't you use them yourself?" He met my eyes. "Because no one would believe me. They painted me as the black sheep, the unstable one. But you've kept records. You've been quiet. You're the good child. Until now. Which makes you dangerous." I took the notebook with a strange calm. Flipping through it was like reading a history I didn't know I was part of. Property deals in other names, forged medical records. A time my mother pretended my brother had a medical emergency to pull charity donations, then spent it on a vacation to the Maldives. It was worse than I imagined. "They've always used people like chess pieces," he said. "You were just the last pawn. And now that you've stepped out of line, they're scrambling." I closed the book. "So what do I do?" He leaned in. "You expose them. Not in a burst, not loud, slowly, carefully, piece by piece. Let their own lies eat them alive." That night, I started with something small. I created an anonymous tip and sent it to the local journalist my mother hated most, a woman who had once written a harsh piece on neighborhood fraud, only to have my mom smear her reputation in response. I knew she'd still remember. The tip included just one thing: proof that my father had submitted falsified income statements to get a property tax break. Harmless looking, but enough to open a file. I sent it. And waited. 3 days later, the story was published online. My dad's name wasn't in the headline, but it didn't need to be. Anyone in our area with half a brain could piece it together. He tried to deny it, of course, said it was fake news. But I watched from afar as he canceled meetings, made hushed calls, and snapped at staff like his world was tilting. It had started. Meanwhile, my brother was getting nervous. His texts changed from threats to guilt trips. "Why are you doing this to the family? You've changed. We just wanted to help you manage things better." I didn't respond. I just sent him a single image, a screenshot of the fake evidence he'd submitted to my office, with his IP address visible in the metadata. He left me on read. Later that week, I got a call from the police department. "We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding an anonymous complaint filed about your parents. There are allegations of financial abuse and fraud." I agreed to meet them. For the first time, I told someone everything, not just about the court case, but about the manipulation, the pressure to give up my salary, the months they told me I was mentally unstable just because I asked to be treated like an adult. The officer didn't blink. "You're not the first person to come forward about them, but you might be the one with the most documentation." When I left the station, I felt like something had shifted. Like I had finally stopped being the scared girl trying to please people who never saw me. Now I was the threat. But just when I thought I had the upper hand, another blow came. My landlord called. "There's been a complaint about you, from your father. He says you've been damaging the property, threatening neighbors, that you've been violent. I'm being forced to consider eviction." I almost laughed. Another attack, another false report. But this time, I was ready. I sent my landlord a full compilation of my security cam footage, time-stamped, dated, quiet, me watering plants, talking to neighbors politely, coming and going without drama. It was boring, which is exactly what I needed it to be. By the time he called back, his voice was sheepish. "I'm sorry, you're clearly not the problem here. I didn't know they'd go this far." "They will," I said, "until they lose." I sat down that night and opened a new file. Labeled, "The Fall Inside," I started building timelines. Every fake report, every phone call, every manipulation I could prove. And then I got another message. This time, a voice memo. It was my mother, cold, precise. "I hope you're happy. You've broken this family. Your father's reputation is in ruins. Your brother can't get hired anywhere anymore. Is this what you wanted?" I didn't reply, because she still didn't get it. This wasn't what I wanted, it's what they made. It had been almost 2 weeks since the story first broke online. My father had gone quiet, not just at home but publicly. No LinkedIn posts, no press quotes, no business brunches. For a man who fed on attention like oxygen, that silence said more than any article ever could. My mother, on the other hand, wasn't retreating, she was lashing out. I got 3 letters in the mail, all from different lawyers. One accusing me of defamation, another threatening to seize property that technically didn't even belong to me. The third? A restraining order attempt for emotional terrorism. Emotional terrorism. That's what they were calling accountability. I showed the letters to my uncle. He didn't even flinch. "This is what they do when they lose power. They try to create noise, hoping you'll drown in it." I didn't drown. I documented everything. And then I launched the second strike. I made a quiet phone call to the Department of Social Services. I reported my own story, clearly, calmly. I explained the financial coercion, the manipulation, the paper trail. And then I did something else. I handed over the names of 3 former tenants my parents had bullied years ago, people they pushed out of cheap apartments by raising rent illegally and faking violations. I had nothing to gain from this, but I wanted to show the universe, and maybe myself, that this wasn't just revenge, it was justice. Meanwhile, my brother had gone dark online. No more gym selfies, no new reels, just silence. But silence from him wasn't peace, it was strategy. He was always quiet before he struck. So I waited. And sure enough, 3 days later, my employer called again. "There's been another complaint." Of course, except this time, it backfired. Because the complaint used an old audio file, one that had already been disproven. The idiot reused it without editing the metadata. This time, IT flagged it instantly. They traced the file back to an old Gmail account tied to my brother's college ID, same account he once used to apply for a summer internship at the same company. When HR confronted me, I didn't even defend myself. I just handed them the full trace log. My brother's IP, his timestamps, his sloppy fingerprints all over everything. They stared at the screen, then at me. "You want us to press charges?" I paused. "No," I said slowly. "Not yet." Because I wanted to do it on my terms. I didn't want to win with fire. I wanted to win with silence. A week passed, then 2. No messages, no lawyers, no more reports. I should have felt safe, but something in my gut whispered, "It's not over." And I was right, because one evening, around 7:30, I opened my door to find a woman standing there, sharp suit, tight bun, government badge. "Are you my full name?" "Yes. I'm with Adult Protective Services. We've received a court-mandated wellness check. A petition was filed stating you're mentally unfit and may be a danger to yourself." My blood ran cold. It was happening again. They were trying the unfit card. Again. But this time they were using the state. I let her in. I had nothing to hide. She was calm, kind, asked me questions, looked around, checked the fridge, the meds drawer, my calendar. By the end, her expression had changed. "You're fine," she said plainly. "I'm sorry you had to go through this." "I know who filed it," I said quietly. She nodded. "I can't confirm that, but you might want to know something." She pulled out her clipboard, flipped to the back. "The same party who filed this also included a copy of your birth certificate, altered to show you were born with a developmental disability." I blinked. "What?" "It's clearly fake. The font doesn't even match. But someone went to great lengths to create it. They were trying to create a medical paper trail, to push a case." I stood there, stunned. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was erasure. They weren't trying to prove I was unstable. They were trying to rewrite who I was. She handed me a copy of the forged document and left. I stared at it for a long time. Then I pulled out my phone and called a lawyer. Not for defense, but for offense. I was done playing defense. The next morning my lawsuit was filed. Defamation, harassment, emotional abuse, forgery of legal documents, and I attached everything: the emails, the messages, the fake reports, even the envelope left at my door. My lawyer looked at me and said, "This isn't just a family dispute anymore. This is a full-scale takedown. Are you ready for what happens next?" I took a deep breath. I've been ready my whole life. I just didn't know it. The courthouse smelled like old paper and tension. I sat on the wooden bench outside the hearing room, my fingers tracing the edge of the file folder in my lap. Inside it were all the documents, my receipts, my evidence, my entire story compressed into paper and ink. I had imagined this day for so long, but now that it was here, the air felt too thick to breathe. My lawyer sat next to me, cool and unreadable. She'd seen worse. She'd fought uglier cases. But I was new to this. I wasn't a warrior. I was someone who had been forced into the battlefield with nothing but truth, and a whole lot of scars. The door creaked open. "Case number 1984 L-Family Motion on Legal Fitness. Petitioners, Mr. and Mrs. Danvers. Respondent, Miss Alina Danvers." I stood. My parents were already seated inside. My mother's lips pressed into a thin, perfect smile. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. My brother was there too, in the back row, arms crossed, pretending like he was just an observer, like he didn't know he was the one who started this whole thing. The judge glanced over the documents like he was scanning a grocery list. Then he looked up, calm but firm. "Mr. and Mrs. Danvers, you filed a petition declaring your daughter mentally unfit to manage her own finances, citing erratic behavior, emotional instability, and workplace issues. You've submitted supporting documents, several character testimonies, and a physician's letter stating cognitive concerns." He raised an eyebrow. "However, upon examination, we've discovered that the physician's letter is fabricated. The contact number leads to a disconnected line. The clinic listed does not exist." A flicker passed across my mother's face. Not panic, just recalculating. I almost admired it. My lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we have proof that the respondents used falsified medical records, created false social media accounts, and harassed the defendant's employer multiple times. Additionally, we have recorded attempts to evict her, to smear her name in the community, and forge legal documents to support a conservatorship-style control over her income." The judge leaned back. "Why now?" he asked quietly, turning to me. "Why are you fighting this now, Alina?" I met his eyes. "Because I finally realized that love without respect isn't love at all. It's control. And I'm done mistaking silence for peace." He looked at me for a moment longer, then nodded once. "I'll take this under advisement." As court adjourned, my parents walked past me. My mother didn't say a word, but my father did. He leaned in and hissed, "You're going to regret this." And for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. I already regret not doing it sooner. Outside, I thought I'd feel lighter. But justice doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with exhaustion and waiting. And the waiting was brutal. Days passed, then a week, then 2. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected more threats, more lawyers, more fake evidence. But then, one night, just after midnight, I got the email. Court ruling in favor of Miss Alina Danvers. Petition denied. Petitioners warned for fraudulent conduct. I stared at it for a long moment. Not because I didn't believe it, but because part of me never thought I'd win. I thought I'd survive, not win. And yet, here it was. I called my uncle first. He didn't say much, just, "Now burn the rest of it down." And I did. The next day, I sent the final dossier to the journalist who had been tracking my parents for months. I gave her full permission to publish it all: the real estate scams, the forged documents, the false medical papers. Everything. She called me just before the article went live. "You sure about this?" "They tried to erase me," I said. "Let them be the ones forgotten instead." The story exploded. Not in a viral, flashy way, but like a slow detonation. One by one, my parents' allies started distancing themselves. Investors pulled out of my father's business. My mother was removed from the community board she once ruled with iron tea parties. Even my brother was dropped by his influencer sponsors. Turns out, no one wanted to back a guy accused of falsifying abuse claims against his own sister. But the biggest blow was silence. People stopped returning their calls, stopped inviting them to events, stopped pretending they were something more than what they were. And in the end, that's what they couldn't handle. Not the lawsuits, not the embarrassment, but the quiet. I saw my mother once more, months later, at the pharmacy. She looked older, smaller, like the silence had eaten part of her. She saw me, and for the first time in my life, she didn't glare. She just looked, then looked away. And that was all I needed, because revenge didn't come in court rulings or headlines. It came in the mirror, where for the first time, I recognized the person staring back. Not a daughter, not a pawn, just me. And I was enough. The quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was a strange, uncertain stillness. Like the eye of a storm I wasn't sure was over yet. I had won. Legally, publicly, even emotionally in some ways. But part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. That some door I thought I'd locked was still cracked open. I kept my distance from everyone related to them. I changed my number again. I even moved into a different apartment in a different neighborhood, smaller, older, but mine. No shadows on the walls, no footsteps down the hall that didn't belong. I'd started writing again, just for me. Nothing fancy, nothing I'd post. But for the first time in years, my thoughts didn't feel like screaming, they felt like a story. And then, on a rainy Thursday evening, it came. An envelope, no sender, no stamps, just slid under my door, quiet as a whisper. My heart sank the moment I saw the handwriting. My brother's. I opened it slowly. Inside, just one photo. A picture of me from years ago, in college, at a party, holding a beer, laughing. Nothing terrible, nothing scandalous, but there was something written across the bottom in red pen. "Still fit, huh?" I sat down. Not in fear, but in exhaustion. This wasn't a message. It was bait. He wanted me to react, to spiral, to slip up so he could say, "See? She's unstable after all." But I wasn't who I used to be. Instead of calling the cops or my lawyer or even my uncle, I picked up the photo, walked to the sink, and burned it over a candle. Watched it curl and disappear. That was the last time I gave him space in my day. But life had a twist even I didn't see coming. One morning, about 2 months later, I got a call from an unknown number. "Alina Danvers?" "Yes?" "This is Detective Moreno with Financial Crimes. You've been listed as a possible whistleblower in an open investigation. Do you have a moment?" I stood up, heart pounding. What? "Your parents have been under quiet surveillance for 3 months now. We've got a web of shell companies, offshore accounts, and suspicious property transfers going back years. The tip we received named you as someone who may have access to internal documents or first-hand knowledge." I swallowed hard. This wasn't over. It had just moved to a higher level. "They used your name in a few of the filings," he added gently. "Without your knowledge, from what we can tell." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Just the truth," he said, "and anything you still have from their business dealings." That night, I opened the old storage box under my bed. All the files I'd once been too scared to look at, the contracts I'd helped type up, the signatures I'd been asked to sign on their behalf when I was 19 and just helping out. And suddenly it all clicked. They hadn't just tried to control me, they'd used me as a front, a name, a shield. They didn't want my salary because they were broke. They wanted it because they'd built their empire on fraud and needed a clean face to mask it. Me. I handed everything over, emails, logs, even voice memos I forgot I had. It wasn't easy, it wasn't fast, but it was happening. One night, I saw it break on the local news. High-profile couple under federal investigation for money laundering, tax evasion, and fraud. Allegations include using their own daughter as a financial front to conceal assets. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the screen. My mother's mugshot came up first, then my father's, then my brother, listed as person of interest pending charges. And in that moment, I felt nothing. No rage, no joy, just silence. The same silence they used to use as punishment. But now, it was freedom. That week, I received an official letter from the district attorney's office thanking me for my cooperation. I wasn't just cleared, I was recognized as someone who helped bring down a ring that had hurt not just me, but dozens of others. And the most poetic part? They used my name, my real name, not as a liability, but as a source of truth. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it away, because it was more than paper, it was proof that I had survived a house built on lies and walked out carrying the only thing that ever mattered, myself. They say healing isn't a straight line, that it comes in waves, some soft, some violent. And they were right. Even after everything, the court victory, the exposure, the investigations, there were nights I woke up gasping from dreams where I was still trapped in that house, still begging for space, still apologizing for existing. But those nights came less and less, and eventually, they stopped. Not because I forgot, but because I forgave myself. Not them, never them, but me. For staying too long, for thinking I deserved it, for confusing obedience with love. For the longest time, I thought if I just did everything right, they'd stop hurting me. That if I just handed over enough, I'd be safe. But you can't appease people who feed on control. You can only starve them of what they crave. And I did. Now, I live in a one-bedroom apartment with creaky floors and sunlight that spills across the walls in the morning like gold. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I go for walks without checking over my shoulder. I laugh too loudly in cafes. I wear what I want without hearing her voice in my head. And most of all, I say no without explaining. That's the real freedom. One afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. Again. But this time I answered without fear. "Alina?" A voice croaked on the other end. Familiar. Frail. It was my father. "Before you hang up," he said quickly, please. "I'm sorry." There was a silence. "I'm dying," he added. Still, I said nothing. "I just thought, you should know." "You thought wrong," I replied. "Goodbye." And I meant it. No anger, no triumph. Just closure. Click. I didn't need revenge anymore, because they weren't powerful anymore. They were just people, broken, exposed, and alone. And me? I wasn't angry. I was busy building a life I didn't have to shrink inside of. I'd started volunteering at a shelter for young women, ones who had lived through versions of what I had. I told them what I wish someone had told me at 19. You're not crazy. You're not selfish. You don't owe anyone your silence just because they share your blood. And they listened, because I wasn't just talking, I was living it. One day, a girl asked me, "Do you ever wish you could go back and fix it all?" I smiled. Because if I hadn't been broken like that, I never would have learned how to rebuild myself properly. That's the thing about people who survive abuse. We don't come back the same. We come back sharper, wiser, untouchable, and sometimes we come back stronger than the people who tried to erase us. My story didn't end in a courtroom or a headline. It ended in a quiet apartment with warm light, good friends, and no voices telling me who to be. And if you ask me what the biggest twist of all was, it wasn't their downfall, it was my rise. Because they never saw it coming. But I did. I just had to survive long enough to meet her, the version of me that didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't fold, and now that she's here, she's never leaving again. So, what happens when your own parents try to erase you from your own life, when they call you unfit just because you finally said no? You stop proving yourself to people who never wanted to see you win. You stop begging for love that comes with a price tag, and you start living for you. They tried to break me in court, but I built myself back in silence, not with revenge, with freedom. And now when someone says, "You've changed," I just smile and say, "Exactly," because this time the story ends on my terms, and I promise you, that's the best kind of revenge there is.